You recently made a comment that went kind of viral. I think you got a lot of heat for it. You said you want to financialize everything. Do you really mean that?
Why'd you scare my grandma with that comment?
If you believe that markets work, what they do is they discover prices. But what if we applied it to some of the most important pressing questions about our future?
Should you be able to bet on anything? Kalshi is one of the fastest growing companies on earth, and it lets you do exactly that. They've fought the government and won, raised billions of dollars, and are in the middle of a fierce rivalry with Polymarket to win the prediction market race.
A power shift is brewing in the sports betting world. What does this mean for sports betting and the gaming stocks?
This week on the show, we have Kalshi CEO Tarek Mansour. We talk about insider trading, why Kalshi employees aren't allowed to use Kalshi, what he thinks of Polymarket, and his controversial comment about wanting to financialize everything. But first, Ellis and I talk about the rise of storytelling in tech and why X is pleading for its haters to return to the platform. This is Access. Ellis, how's it going, my friend?
I'm well. How about you?
I'm good. We've got a lot to talk about today. We've got Tarek Mansour on the show, the CEO of Kalshi. But first, Ellis, I've been noticing that everyone seems to have FOMO about what you do, about being a quote-unquote storyteller, that storytelling is the hot new thing.
According to the Wall Street Journal, at least, they had a big story, was it yesterday, talking about the rise of the storyteller and frankly, the decline of reporters. How did that feel? Going from earned media to maybe we'd call it invented media.
Yeah.
Co-created media, masturbatory corporate media, one of the above. Take your pick.
This was one of those stories that got viral screenshotted on X by a bunch of people we both follow in the tech world. Everyone, clamping on about their savvy media strategy that they have. And I just think it's kind of interesting that this is becoming a hot topic. And I think it kind of signals where everyone's head is at, that in an age of infinite AI, everything, and products that all kind of do the same thing, maybe the thing that matters is how you talk about your company. I don't know. You're the professional. You tell me.
Humanity has never been more important. What we need is storytelling. I mean, to me, it's nothing new. I feel like this is just the next evolution of content marketing and social. I mean, it's so crazy to me. I remember being back at The Verge like 12 years ago, and our friend Sam Sheffer was doing social, probably paid a pittance to do this, like every other social media person in the industry.
Shout out Hype Desk.
And that's all there is now, is social. And fortunately, these folks are being paid a lot more now for the value of their work and their skill at packaging content to fit in algorithmic social feeds. To me, this whole storytelling revolution, I think, kind of coincides with this whole idea of founders and creators being interesting. And when you are telling whatever you have to say from the horse's mouth, it typically feels more authentic or more interesting than it's being translated by somebody else, whether it's a reporter or the social media desk or otherwise. So yeah, to me, I mean, this is just kind of the next step. I mean, selfishly, the way that I think about what I do is that it's more than just telling a story, but actually understanding all your audiences these days. As a tech founder, whether it's investors or candidates or internal teams or advertisers or in, retail even before your IPO. And so I do think there is like a meaningful difference there. I guess when I reflect on this, I'm glad it's being appreciated. I'm glad people are seeing this convergence, I guess, of the way that we communicate with the world and just being real about it. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it feels a little funny as the attention turns away from creators or even influencers and reporters in terms of how you get your narrative out to the world,
You can still get your narrative out to the world through sources.news. Thank you very much.
You bring like immense context, I feel like, to every story. And so if you're a company that has trouble translating their differentiation, I mean, but that is what a storyteller is in my mind.
Yeah, I don't know. I think founders should go direct more, but I think a lot of founders are wet blankets and have no personality and no ability to talk about what they do beyond the nuts and bolts of the actual thing. And to really do this well, You have to be, I think someone like Tarek, who we have on later in the show, who can talk about it more at a high level. And that just takes, that takes like a certain personality. It takes experience. It takes training. But yeah, I mean, I just think storytelling as a concept in the tech world becoming so popular right now with AI, I think, yeah, just to me suggests that there's a lot of copycats and a lot of cookie cutter type things out there. I'm reminded of a quote that Ilya Sutskever gave the Darkesh Patel podcast recently, where he was like, Silicon Valley has more companies than ideas right now. And it does feel that way.
Yeah. And when there's less differentiation, or when everybody's building the same thing, the story becomes even more of a potential lever to hook people, or just talk about yourself to the world more without pitching your product every day. I mean, that's really how I think about it. It's just a world now where everything is content. And that applies to us as well, in the way that like we package this podcast, what clips we choose, what platforms we post on. And in some ways, I think it's nice that it's a bit more of a meritocracy maybe than it once was, where it was all follower driven and it took years and years and years to build followers, so you had any leverage. So I think that's the bright side of it. But yeah, when everybody's building AI wrappers, it is awfully hard to stand out now. So we need to invent a new job for that.
Everything is content. Is that the first slide of your deck?
Kind of. I think the first slide of my deck, which is no longer as relevant as it once was like, if you build it, they will come, and it's just crossed out. And that was more of a hot take a couple years ago. Now that seems kind of like obvious, How's anybody going to use your app if they haven't heard of it?
Right. And I mean, I definitely feel this from my perspective of being an independent journalist now for just a few months, but the amount of outreach I've gotten from VC firms, startups, big companies that want to work with me on quote unquote storytelling. And I'm like, no, thanks. You can just, give me an interview. But it is a huge...
Wait, you don't plug me in that conversation?
I do if it's
you had a perfect opportunity there and you didn't take it.
No, I plug you a lot. But I'm not, for the person to come in and like brand the company, right? It's like figure out how to reach so-and-so audience. I think of what you do at a little more high level, but yeah, I think there's a lot of people who think analytically and from an engineering mindset or a product manager mindset, but very few people who actually can step back and think about how is this actually going to engage an audience? And, I struggle with that. It's something that I can rotate too much in one way or the other all the time in my work. And you don't want to like be overly, programming, overly trying to game the algo. I mean, we talk about this with the podcast and how we do the podcast, but you also want to be relevant. So it seems like a very hard line to walk.
I think maybe in some ways you have had a bit less practice than others because you have scoops to lean on.
Yeah, scoops do help.
You don't need to sensationalize what a company is about when you are breaking news that has that inherent value. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that is the core of the storytelling to me when I work with any client, is in some ways just trying to find what's most newsworthy about them. And you are right. I don't know if I'd call them all wet blankets, but they all do think that what they're building is inherently interesting, because that's why they're building it for 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And I do think, as that Wall Street Journal article points out, the reporter's instinct to know what is going to break through, that's all you do every day. 3, 4, 5 times a day. Bit different for you. You're probably spending a lot more time over the long term building these relationships. Sometimes the source will tell you something in a year that they may not tell you today. But back when I was doing it, it was like, especially at Business Insider, when I was writing fucking 5 articles a day, getting immediate feedback from the algorithm and also the clicks on the front page of what headlines are working.
Sharpie.
You get pretty good, right? You get pretty good at understanding what type of language people need. But yeah, I guess one other nice thing about former reporters is that we also have some pride and dignity in trying not to like completely give in to the tricks, if you will. Like, I don't feel comfortable doing that. I think a lot of people probably do.
That's why we're all broke as reporters.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do think we embody a better balance than many others.
Support for this show comes from Mercury. Running a business is hard work. That's why Mercury makes managing your money as simple as can be, with banking, cards, spend management, invoicing, and more all in one place. It's banking at its most intuitive. Visit Mercury.com to join over 200,000 entrepreneurs who use Mercury to simplify their finances. Mercury is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services provided through Choice Financial Group and Column NA members FDIC. Well, speaking of scoops, you want to talk about this interview I did recently?
Yeah, I want to talk about the interview you did. I mean, this was a good one, man. I mean, this is some stuff I've been wanting to hear for a while. Yeah. So yeah, Alex, you sat down with Nikita Beer, who is the head of product now for X, formerly Twitter. And nice to hear someone actually talk about what they're doing with a fine-tooth comb, an actual product builder. I mean, what do you feel like when you look back on this? You know, you took away the most.
But nice to hear that there's someone there like keeping the lights on and thinking about the product direction. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've known Nikita for a long time. I would say he's become a personality in the tech world. He's this viral master of social apps who sold one to Meta back in the day, TBH, and then another called Gas to Discord. And I think Nikita's hilarious. Like I said, I mean, he's in LA too. I've known each other for years. But yeah, when he reached out and was like, "Look, do you want to do an interview about bringing journalists back to X?" I was like, "Yes, of course." It was his first interview since he took the job about 7 months ago. He reports to Elon directly. And yeah, I thought this was interesting that this was the first thing that a senior, leader at X is coming out and saying, which is, we really want media and even, capital J journalists to come back. And I think I know why, which is that, I've been covering Twitter before Elon bought it. For many years, I extensively covered when Elon bought it. And Twitter has always had this problem where a very small percentage of the user base posts most of the content. And that's true for, I don't know, I guess Snap was a little different because that was messaging, right? But these one-to-many platforms, that's usually the case. But even by kind of industry standards, Twitter was always pretty top-sided that way. And they would call them like I think they were VITs. A next tweet is going to
very important tweeters.
Yeah, something like that. Very important tweeters or something. And they would track this obsessively because this would this factor would basically determine whether Twitter was working or not. And I mean, what you saw with Elon, right, is like obviously a bunch of people in the media left, including many of my peers and close friends in the media who, to be honest, like kind of made me feel like shit for staying on X. It became like it is a political thing. And, you had Blue Sky happen, you had Threads happen, and this diaspora now where everyone's kind of spread out. And like I wrote in this interview, now I check 3 apps a day instead of 1 to find out what's going on in the world. And that hasn't changed, 3 years. It's crazy to think like it's been basically 3 years since Elon bought Twitter, which is wild. And Nikita basically just outlined with me that, they're making changes in the product that he thinks will hopefully incentivize people to come back. That's a new link viewer that is driving more traffic to web pages. I can attest to that personally in my traffic.
Are they still like completely shadow banning Substack links as they want?
So he says that's not happening. There's no shadow banning of like certain link domains. There's no.
That was not a shadow ban. That was a public ban.
That was a direct Elon ban. Yeah, and the interesting backstory to that, at the time when that happened, that was again around the acquisition, was Elon was trying to buy Substack. He was actually trying to pitch Chris Best, the CEO, on being the CEO of de facto CEO. I mean, Elon's obviously the real CEO, but the de facto CEO of Twitter. So there was, I think, some more stuff going on in the background there. But yeah, they were doing that. And, Elon was banning journalists for reporting about the whereabouts of his private jet based on publicly accessible information. I think really stretching the definition of doxing to target journalists who were doing some pretty critical reporting of his acquisition at the time. So again, there's no fault or I have no qualms, I guess, with my friends in the media who have said we're never coming back as long as Elon's running it. But it's interesting to see Nikita say, look, like, you'll get traffic. I mean, he posted like, this is the biggest arbitrage opportunity of your career for your journalist to come back because we have the audience. I think it's like 500 million plus people a month coming to the platform. Who knows how many of those are bots, but time spent is at a record high. I don't think that's true though. You don't think it's true?
No, they have vacated so much of the quote unquote newsiness, I feel like, of this platform. Like what I see most of the time, I'm very interested in news, and yeah, most of the posts I see are still from the last couple of days, but it has really become, for better or worse, like TikTok for text or memes or what have you. I mean, I don't know if it feels like that for you, but I don't know. I feel like engagement is down when I post about anything newsy. Like it is very much just kind of visual, opinion-driven stuff similar to the other platforms. It's just kind of incidentally who's still there. I feel like that's working. And in a lot of ways, because the subject matter is a lot more personalized now as opposed to your follow graph, I think it's actually even harder to stand out.
That's interesting. I mean, that also speaks to what Nikita said about the algorithm.
Or maybe I just suck at posting.
No. I think what they've done is they've replaced the traditional algorithm, which had a bunch of classifiers and labels that someone like Elon could go downrank so-and-so, downrank this category of content or these accounts, to this purely Grok-based, which is like, for better or worse.
Whatever that means.
Grok-based, personalized LLM-based algorithm that is entirely training on your preferences and your interactions. So maybe that's what you're telling X you want, Ellis.
Well, I am. But how many people are saying, I mean, I'm obsessed with the news more than most people. And it's good these days, I start engaging with more, I started playing some old Mega Man games and I'm really enjoying them. And now I'm seeing really good Mega Man accounts, doing niche memes and old artwork from the old games. That's great. All I'm saying is that they don't appear to be focusing, especially if they're not tipping the scales, on news.
Well, I don't think they have a lot of news on the platform. That's the problem. I mean, that's why he was doing the interview, is they need the posters to come back, and journalists were the posters. And, some of us have stayed, and the reason I never left is because I think it's my job to be close to my sources. I named sources for a reason. And the AI community in particular has never left X. To say that you're trying to cover this industry and understand what's going on and you're not on X and you're not interacting, to me, you're not doing your job well. Sure, you can still break news and you can still, you may not need it, but it still has been tremendously advantageous to me from that perspective. And it's the main reason I've stayed on. But yeah, I think that's why he did the interview. It's there's not a lot of news. It's kind of all over the place. I mean, I feel like do you check Blue Sky or Threads much?
Not really. I think I see Threads via the crazy cross-promotion module inside of my Instagram home feed. Blue Sky, I get Blue Sky links from a friend or two, but that's it. By the way, great headline. I love X wants its haters back. Did that just come to you?
That just came to me. No LLM involved, actually. Yeah, thank you. I mean, I wanted a little bit of rage bait. This was a classic Blue Sky rage bait story. I would say the vast majority of my peers in tech media are very active on Blue Sky and not at all on X, maybe some on Threads. I think Threads is actually trending in the direction of Reddit. If you look at what they're doing with the community stuff, the sports stuff that they're leaning into. Connor Hayes, the head of Threads, is also going to be in Sources this week, but he just did a podcast with a bunch of NBA people. I think they're going more in that direction. And for X, I mean, they really need to convince people to leave Blue Sky, which I don't know. I mean, Blue Sky is its own echo chamber, man. It's
yeah,
you jump on there and it's you better you can imagine immediately in your head, like, this is what it takes to work on blue sky and to be successful. And it's a very particular POV on things. It's like, you're very skeptical, or you just downright hate AI. You hate Elon, you love Mandami. Like, there's this Venn diagram of like all these things that makes you on blue sky. And like, I wish we were all together again, I guess. And Elon was, he says he wants to make the town square, and he has utterly failed at that in the last few years, right? It's the opposite. And I think everyone is right to be very, very skeptical of that not happening, I guess.
Well, to close things out before we get to the interview, did he divulge any juicy little funny Elon stories or habits?
No, he did not. We're going to have to save that for a future conversation.
You didn't ask?
I asked a little bit. He said he meets with Elon multiple times a week, and that Elon is spending most of his time on X and XAI.
Is it still going to be the everything app?
They're launching X Money, the payments thing that he said he was going to do when he bought the company. I think they're launching it this month before New Year's. So you're going to be able to pay the bots this in crypto or whatever. I think it'll be fiat, but yeah, that's launching very soon.
Yeah, it is interesting to watch. I mean, these platforms, the features, as is long become obvious, are no longer really the differentiators, whether it's the feed or the DMs or the size of images or videos. It seems like it really just kind of has become who's on here, and that may, I think, be fine for companies of a certain scale, depending on their ambitions. But I'm hopeful, that these different platforms can emerge for different communities, though I really do miss that moment of monoculture where everybody on Twitter was live tweeting the Oscars or the Apple event or whatever it was. That there is no place for that these days. And that was a special moment. I wonder, though, I guess that was the idea with Twitter that didn't allow them to grow to the size of that their investors wanted, is that not enough people wanted that.
I think Twitter didn't grow for a lot of other more practical, just bad execution reasons, but that's a whole nother conversation. All right, should we kick it to Tarek?
Yeah, let's do it.
When I recently decided to start my own media business, I chose Mercury as my banking solution. And I want to tell you a little bit about how I use it day to day. The thing I love the most about Mercury is how simple it is. Setup was easy and pain-free. I love the way it shows my balance growth at a glance, and it's super easy to sync my transactions to my accounting software. A specific feature I love is the ability to upload receipts and have them automatically synced to the right transaction. That saves me a ton of time. The built-in invoicing feature has already come in handy too. I mostly use the Mercury mobile app to stay in sync with my business finances, but the desktop web interface is also the cleanest I've ever seen. If you want to see for yourself what Mercury can do for you and your business, visit Mercury.com to join over 200,000 entrepreneurs who use Mercury to simplify their finances. Mercury is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services provided through Choice Financial Group and Column NA members FDIC. Tarek, we were joking while we were waiting for you that we should have started a market about what time you were going to join.
Nice.
I don't know how specific the markets are getting these days. Do people make them for such specific things?
No, nothing like that. But there are certain things that like people have interest in that could be about like nothing about like someone who works at a company or anything like that. And also the people at Kalshi can't trade. So we because we run a regulated exchange, so you cannot actually trade.
Oh, really? You have a no trading rule?
It's also like the regs, the regulatory framework doesn't enable us to trade on our own exchange. It's an interesting thing because it's hard to build a product when you can't actually really use it. It makes it a little bit harder. So there's like that interesting dynamic.
Have you talked about that before? How do you do that? Yeah, how do you build a product you can't use yourself?
You just have to be very close to the customers. Like really, really be very, I mean, it's cliche, like all companies obviously talk a lot about staying close to the customer, but I think this is especially true here where you just have to really be at all times as close as possible to the customer to basically figure out like what you need to build and like how to make it better and what are the points of friction. But there are some industries where like, the technologist or the product builder cannot fully experience their own product. You know, it could be in like in hard tech, or like if you're kind of machinery, like, right, like you're not sitting in the office and like operating some heavy machinery, and so you also have to really kind of embed yourself with the customer. But yeah, no, I think it's feasible, but it is a challenge.
Do we believe that Tim Cook is actually using the Vision Pro in his office or not is the real question. I mean, that does strike me as like pretty remarkably tough, especially when things are moving so quickly. And I do believe that, like, having worked at Snap and the browser company, that founder does have a unique ability to make changes in the product when things don't feel right, whether it's with like the way a screen flows or a notification or otherwise. I've definitely come to believe over the years that dog fooding is a pretty critical lever. I wonder if there's any way to like say, hey, my friend, you're about to take a sabbatical for a little while. You're going to gather some feedback, use the app for a while, come back. But I guess that would still be biased, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but it also would work. You have to have like a 6-month post Kalshi period. So if you leave, you have to wait for 6 months before you could trade. So, but it is. I mean, there are ways to kind of like you could still use the app without trading, right? Like so that could get you a lot of the. I mean, that could get you a lot of the flows, except for maybe the core trading flow. And then we have like an internal like demo, like no real money, like free money version of the product. But that's also different. That also has different dynamics. So we get close, but not quite there yet.
Same product, no dopamine.
It's like, I mean, the whole point, right, is like having skin in the game. Right. Changes the behavior of people, right? Like that's the whole point. It goes back to sort of the whole question about polls versus prediction markets, or like experts versus prediction markets. Like the whole difference is there's some skin in the game here, right? If you take out the sort of monetary incentive or this idea of like, put your money where your mouth is, then we default back to kind of a regular poll, right? People can just say anything. Sort of the whole kind of truth-seeking aspect sort of erodes. You can bring back the bias, bring back the subjectivity. And so the money component is a critical component to kind of take you from the subjective to the objective, rational plane. So it's a big difference.
I think if your employees were using it, they'd also be spending a lot more time in the bathroom as well.
As they were. I mean, maybe, yeah. They'd be distracted.
I was reading recently about how companies are deciding whether or not to ban prediction market trading for their employees as well. So it's interesting to hear that Kalshi bans it. I actually was reading too that Google built its own internal prediction market, and that this is becoming more common. So yeah, what's your advice to companies weighing whether they should allow their employees to use your product?
I think that's okay. I mean, look, the same rules apply. So the rules that apply to the stock market generally mostly, like basically the same rules apply to prediction market, or at least regulated prediction markets, which is the case for Kalshi. And so it's an important distinction to be drawn, right? Like if from the early days, from the kind of day one, it's like we're in financial services, and we're offering a financial product. And I think in that industry, I would say like regulation is a very critical component or pillar of how you build things. And so we define a principle which is regulatory first. We're going to do everything regulated upfront. And what regulated means, the thing at a high level is like, figure out like customer protection, like make sure that people understand what they're getting into and what they're doing. And number two is market integrity, or this idea of fairness. Create rules that are fair and for the different participants. It's right, like if you're getting into a game that is not fair, you don't want to participate in that, or whether it's like anything in life, and like if it's and so you have to kind of create it. Like the stock market, a set of rules that like make it fair. And so like the stock market, the way that we've regulated this, and we worked for 4 years before we launched a single product. So working with the CFTC, which is the federal regulator, to regulate this like a financial market. And so you have the same set of prohibitions. So like, like market manipulation is not allowed, things like wash trading, spoofing, and then like this notion of insider trading, and what it means, like what is insider trading and how do you define it? And so that is regulated like exactly like the stock market. And so we have the same sort of set of protections. We have systems that flag for these things. And then if you flag somebody who committed it, it could go from a fine to like if you commit insider trading on a stock, it could be like a financial crime, like it could be a criminal prosecution. And so it's an interesting question. Like when it comes to companies, it's very similar to if you are an employee of a tech company and you know something about the quarterly earnings, like you cannot buy options based on that knowledge, right? And the way to draw the line is essentially like you cannot use material non-public information to trade, right? And what does that mean? So it's basically you cannot use information that is not supposed to be public. That is like you are not supposed to make that information public by trading, because actually trading with that information is in some way one way of making it public. Like you can go make information public by like saying it to the press or saying it to friends, but another way is actually trade on it, because if you trade on it, you're moving the price in a certain direction. And so that's another way to make it public. And the same rules apply to Kalshi. And so that applies to people, the companies, government, members of, for example, like Congress, if they have an impact or knowledge on a specific like a bill or something that they are themselves doing, and kind of it's kind of like a case by case. Also applies to sports.
I was just going to ask, has anyone ever been fined or sent to the slammer then for something on Kalshi?
So a few things. Because we've why do we take this whole regulated approach? We take this whole regulated approach because we believe this market will be very large, and we believe that one of the ways to go, like the only way to go mainstream really, is to kind of build it regulated rails so that institutions, big partners, can adopt it over time. But then the second thing is that you want to build something with the right set of safeguards so that you mitigate and avoid sort of like the risks to happen. Any new technology, especially financial technology comes with a certain set of risks. That's always true. Self-driving cars, Uber, Airbnb, all of it comes with risk. And regulation, what it does is like, it is a forcing function, because you have a regulator that has decades of experience that have seen how things go wrong, whether it's, in drugs or in financial markets or whatever, to basically like pressure test your systems. And, we've done 4 years of pressure testing before we went live. Now, kind of since start to finish, we started in 2019. Now we're, basically 2026. It's been like 7 years of pressure testing the system. So the systems work really well. Like it's working as intended. And you probably have noticed, like you don't really, like there haven't been kind of cases of like people doing bad things on Kalshi, because it was very regulated. We ask you for your KYC, all the trades are reported to the government. Like it's kind of a bad place to try to commit fraud. There are other alternatives offshore, unregulated, and it's an easier way to do it, right? Like if you want to do something weird with crypto, you probably won't go to Coinbase. You'll probably go to some offshore, exchange that like offers similar services, because there's no KYC, they don't know who you are, they don't report things to the government. So that's one. So I think in Kalshi, those risks are very largely mitigated because of our regulated nature. Two, there's something else that's interesting, which is the rules for an exchange. So we're an exchange, which is an SRO, a self-regulated organization. You have to have a bifurcation between the commercial business aspects and the market surveillance regulatory functions. So the market surveillance regulatory functions report to the CRO, who reports directly to the board. And a lot of the specific cases actually I'm not privy to. So it's interesting, because then you don't want to have impact on, you don't want to have like a conflict of interest, right? Like for example, if it's like a big customer that did something wrong, like the business may want to like be like, oh, maybe you should, but the rules say like actually there's an information wall between those two. So that the regulatory side can interface with the regulator and the audit committees, etc., independently of the commercial side. So they have full autonomy.
Wow. So not only do you not get to use the product, but you don't actually fully know when people misuse the product, it sounds like.
The relevant team, including exactly the chief regulatory officer, know, but the commercial side doesn't know. So, and this, by the way, this is common. For example, how at like Goldman, so at banks, how like the trading side and the banking side cannot share information between each other. I guess the trading side can share with the banking, but the banking cannot share with the trading. And it's the same thing, I guess. Commercial can share with the regulatory, but there's some set of information that the regulatory cannot share with the business.
Are these regulatory bodies equipped to investigate potential insider trading on this scale, as the number of things that you could bet on or trade just dramatically multiplies?
The answer is definitely, look, the CFTC, it's interesting, people talk about the scale of prediction markets, but look, this year, the prediction markets have grown massive, to be clear. So right now, I think, so Kalshi is doing something like $70-80 billion of volume a year, and the broader industry maybe is $150-200 billion with millions of customers participating. But then let's compare that to the commodities markets and the swaps markets that the CFTC regulates. And actually, let me ask you, how much notional volume do you think goes through the Chicago Mercantile Exchange a year?
I was more interested maybe, I mean, I don't know the number, but I think maybe the more relevant number is, volume per trader per se. Like I know
It's
that,
still pretty
it may,
small for Kalshi. It's tiny.
right. And
Comparably.
so that's what I'm saying. I realize it might be smaller, but I think the number of potential retail investors or just everyday people who are getting involved has just got to be on a very different scale, I would think.
I mean, that number that I was going to mention is a quadrillion.
Haven't heard quadrillion on the podcast yet. We need an air horn or something.
Yeah, it's 1,000 trillion. So the CME does like $3 trillion of volume a day. And it's a massive market. There's very large diversity of participants in the US and outside of the US. Some of it is institutional, a lot of it is retail. But then you have, the S&P futures, you have a bunch of different kind of products. But it's a regulator that has kind of overseen like mass amounts of data, like mass amounts of transactions on a daily basis across the board. And yes, you could have a composition, and I think it's not as kind of we still have sort of a concentration of volume amongst like the kind of like prosumer traders or institutions. These things are not like, they're not like uniform, right? It's not like you have 100 traders that do equal amount of volumes. It's kind of very tilted. And it's also existent in the traditional markets. So you have kind of a long tail distribution, or like a skewed distribution. But the important thing here is like actually, and this is very interesting, when people look to commit fraud, they don't do it for like $10 or $20, right? Like they usually, they try to make money out of it, right? Otherwise, why are you violating the law? And the fortunate thing about that is that the larger the size, the easier it is to flag, the more unusual the pattern is. It's like, when someone, for example, goes out, like when you hear about the SEC investigate some insider trading, it's because usually some trader at a bank bought a kind of an out of the money option 2 days before earnings. But that option, they bought like millions of it, right? Or they bought like a large size. That usually is actually it's kind of a problem that's like a much easier one to solve.
Yeah, not very sneaky, realistically.
It gets flagged. It gets flagged
Yeah.
fast, and then you look at it, it's like, who are you? Who do you know? How'd you get this information? And then you can escalate to investigations and the regulators.
So in this context, people are probably seeing headlines recently about there was this trader, I think the name was like Alpha Raccoon or something, who netted over like $1 million by very accurately predicting Google's 2025 year in search rankings, to the extent that like this person probably worked inside Google. But that happened on Polymarket, and you don't actually hear stories of this, or at least I haven't seen stories of something like this on Kalshi. Maybe I just haven't seen it. But I imagine for you get lumped in with those kind of headlines, and it's like, oh, prediction markets allow insider trading, blah, blah, blah. Like, why did that happen on Polymarket and not Kalshi?
It's the same as the kind of like the regulated versus unregulated model, right? Like and I always say this, it's like, you can take any financial market, like you can take the stock market, right? Which a lot of us perceive as regulated, and there's the right set of rules and et cetera. And if somebody offshore like opens up a stock market without KYC, without the sort of like same level of protections, yes, things are going to happen on that marketplace, right? Like it's not like the thing I always say is like, there are bad actors everywhere, right? The bad actors are like, they'll always try to find outlets to, do bad acts. That's what they do. And so there's this key distinction between regulated and unregulated. And I think generally with nascent technologies, people sort of like merge the two and like treat them as similar. And you see this with crypto, right? Like there were good actors in crypto that were doing things regulated, and sometimes they had challenges with the government. Like Coinbase had all sorts of challenges with the government, but that was a good actor. It was like trusted, KYC, where your money sits, and you can trust us with it, and we report to the federal government and so on and so forth. And then there were like offshore actors where you could put your money and you have no idea where it's going, right? Like you have absolutely no guarantees that money could be going to somebody's pocket, it could be going whatever. But for new technologies, people, like if something goes wrong in the unregulated piece, they can lump the entire sort of space in one. As you said, I mean, it's totally right, Alex. Like I totally agree with this. It's a matter of education. It's a matter to show that like, look, there are actors that are going to do things the right way, and then there are actors that, may have started to do things and maybe not so much the right way, and over time may kind of converge. But the most important thing, and maybe this is kind of the thing that we're getting at in some ways, like, if you want to commit a bad act, you're not going to do it in a regulated exchange. We would know the name of that person. We would investigate that transaction. we would report to the government and everybody could see it transparently, right? You would prefer doing it by paying somebody in some crypto and, not traceable, like dark web thing, right? And that's actually reinforces the importance of a regulated, transparent model for this, because then all the activity is out there for everybody to see, and we can work with regulators, and we could put the right set of like sort of checks and balances and enforce them.
Yeah, you all are really big, but Polymarket is too, and it's actually amazing to me the amount of mindshare Polymarket has in the tech community, especially considering they're not officially launched yet in the U.S. I was just at the DealBook Summit in New York where Andrew Ross Sorkin was talking about Polymarket from the stage constantly. The All-In guys talk about them. They're everywhere. Shane is everywhere. I really want to know how you feel about that. I have to imagine Polymarket being so prevalent in the mind of like the tech community specifically bothers you. But how do you think about that and your rivalry with them right now?
I don't know if it bothers us as much. I mean, like, I would say a few things. Like the number one metric we track is not really mindshare or like, I don't know, like visits or other. It's like actual number of users, volume, financial health of the company, and do we have a real business? And I think on that, sort of from that perspective, we're much larger. And there's a bunch of ways to kind of measure that. And, you probably have seen the sort of charts coming around and other. To us, that's kind of the most important thing, like number of users, real volume, real kind of revenue, like financial metrics. It's interesting because last year, if you were to kind of look at the mind share of Kalshi like versus Polymarket, we were probably kind of like 5 to 10% of the mind share. There's ways to measure. You can look at Google search, for example, like how many people know about a company versus the other. It was a tough year because, in 2024, in the early 2024, really kind of that similar dynamic was happening. So we, again, stood firm by our principle, which is regulatory first. We are not going to do anything that is sort of like outside of the bounds of the law. That's kind of a principle we're never going to.
You didn't want to be a shoot first, ask questions later tech company?
Just financial services, I don't think is the right thing to do, right? I really think financial services, the long-term winners are like, measure twice, cut once, do it right.
It's one thing when it's burrito taxis. It's another when it's
very
financial
different.
Services, huh?
It's very, very different, right? Because in financial services, when things go wrong, they go wrong in a bad way. And so you really need a regulator and you need a regulatory oversight. So it was hard. Last year was hard because, they were getting the mind share because they launched the market. They just did it, there's a whole debate whether it was in the US or not, but, it was obviously a lot of people were in the US. But like that, they scaled because they had the market and they had the offering. Obviously, they scaled much ahead of us. They basically went ahead and before us. And that was a difficult period for the company because like that was, I would say, the most difficult period because we were kind of like hamstrung, like being told no by the government. And, and then you had a competitor that's sort of like doing it, and you've seen it's kind of, I think Coinbase had their fair share of competitors that operate that way. And that happened over and over. And it was tough because you go to the regulators, like you're blocking us, but you're not blocking them. Like, how is this fair, right? Like, and that was, I think, the toughest part of the journey. But the beauty is like when we won the lawsuit last year, so we sued the government over the election market and we won that, and we were right up on this, we were on the right side of the law. The market share obviously changed, but the mind share now, when we were looking at the metrics for this last quarter, like the fall, we're actually something like 55% of the Google searches in the US. Like we've actually overtaken even in mind share. And so, for a while we've been leading on like the core business metrics and the product and the team, but now we're also actually at least equivalent in terms of the mind share. We've gained a lot of territory there. So it's just a matter of time. I think at the end of the day, everything will converge towards a better product, and I feel pretty good about our product.
Do you think Polymarket is doing things the right way?
I think that's on them to comment. I think that like...
Oh, come on.
I mean, look, our view is like, we approached it differently. I think we approached it sort of regulated in the US, do it right as a US company. And, they kind of did sort of offshore and the VPN thing and all of that. That was kind of the historical thing. And I just mentioned like, that was sort of like a source of difficulty for us because it's like, we are carrying all the burden of legalizing the space, which was so tough, right? Like we spent 4 years and it was really like a very, very difficult journey to make this happen because, you had the kind of battles with the government and they were kind of pushing us and they really wanted to sort of like this model not to exist without a lot of like real basis. And then you had like a bit of a sort of dynamic where the opponent or the competition like had no restriction whatsoever, right? It's a bit like you're in a boxing ring and then your hands are tied behind your back and then you have to kind of go box, right? Whereas your opponent, like doesn't have their hand tied behind their back. And they may even have a knife, right? And you're just getting like, you're just kind of in that ring. So that was tough. And there's no secret about it. And we had our history between the two companies, as you know.
It's a very fierce rivalry, I would say. You guys.
It was a very fierce rivalry because of that dynamic, right? It's like you're sitting there and we're getting bloodied here, and like you go to, and people weren't realizing it. It's like, guys, like and it's not like customers or others like give you props to try to do things the right way. That's the tough part about doing things the right way. It is hard, right? It's not the easy route. It's not like you do it and then people are like, great job, congrats, you did things the right way. Actually, no one really cares until it matters. Like no one cared about, for example, like FTX was sort of like the golden child for a while up until it sort of blew up, and then everybody cared overnight, right? So that was the hard part. And like, look, I mean, we made some mistakes as a company. There were some incidents where, we made some bad tweets about them, and they made some mistakes. They made some bad tweets about us. And there was a lot of this sort of back and forth where like we would go to press, they would go to press, and so on and so forth. And we were just, at the time, at least in 2024, is like we just go up to the press, the regulators, like, guys, do you not see this dynamic? Like, we are being blocked from doing anything, and then they are not. Like, how is this fair? How is this happening? So that was, I think, deeply frustrating. I think this year, well, one, we learned from our mistakes in the past, but now we're also like a very different paradigm where like we did actually win that lawsuit and legalize the space. We did open up the space in a legitimate way, and there's a real way for the space to exist in a regulated, safe, responsible way now. It could become legitimate. And I think that changes the dynamic because, well, one, that was very advantageous to us. It was a huge kind of boost for us as a company, obviously in the results. But it was also beneficial for them because now they have a path to come and do it the right way and do it regulated and legal. And I think it seems like this is the path that we're doing. They're trying to converge. They're pivoting towards our strategy. And I think that's a good thing. And I hope they stay committed to that because I think over time, both of us will push the space. As long as there's sort of fair and reasonable competition between the two of us, I think this is going to be great for the both of us.
Support for this show comes from Mercury. When you're building a business, you need banking that moves with you and helps you build momentum. As someone who just started a media company, trust me, this is super important. With Mercury, banking is so much more than a place to store your money. It's a platform that helps you push your business forward. I use Mercury every day, and I love how powerful but easy the platform is to use. It's fast and designed for how businesses actually work. From one place, you can send payments to contractors around the world, invoice clients and track what you're owed, and even manage team spend without extra tools. With a clear view of money coming in and going out, you can see precisely where you stand so you know what to do next. Whatever you want to do with your money, Mercury makes it feel effortless. Visit Mercury.com to join over 200,000 entrepreneurs like me who love Mercury. Mercury is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services provided through Choice Financial Group and Column NA members FDIC.
If you would have told yourself 10 years ago that you would be suing the government and be on South Park in 10 years, what do you think you would have said?
I mean, it's just like an absurd problem, you know what I mean? It's just like, it's like also how do you kind of relate those two, right? It's like, I think
is this a good outcome or the world's worst outcome?
I think it's a pretty good outcome. I think that I would just sort of dissect that for a sec. Like, I think the suing the government and South Park, they're both interesting and they talk to two different things. Like, suing the government is interesting because not many people do that. Especially your own regulator. So that, but the beauty about the US is like you have that sort of system, right? Like the government has checks and balances, and that's an amazing thing about our system. It's like none of the three powers that may be have full autonomy and full power. They kind of self-check and check each other. We disagreed with the regulator's assessment. These markets, the law was clearly saying they were legal. And I always say this, I think the law applies to the industry, to participants and people, but it also applies to the government. Sometimes this is kind of missed, right? The government is not the law. There is the law. And the law is something that we all have to apply, including the government. And we disagree with that decision. And I think we were bold enough. It was a very difficult decision. I think suing a government comes with a lot of cost. And we were hurt pretty dramatically by that. But we won, and we were right. And so I think that's number one. I think that's kind of like a beauty. I came from Lebanon, right? Like that is something that would never happen in Lebanon. Like just like the notion of like, I disagree with the government, I'm going to go sue it. It's like where do you even go? Like, I don't even know, like if you walk into the courthouse with a lawsuit in hand, I don't even know, like I think they turned it into a cigarette maybe. You know, and the South Park thing, I think is just a statement that like we built something that has gone mainstream. Like I think that like people care about, and I think that's I think it's been a wild ride to get there.
How do you think about Kalshi as a part of everyday life? It seems like everywhere you turn, there are billboards, Instagram ads, even on the Apple Sports app, they've got betting lines. And I know you guys do a lot of advertising that certainly I'm seeing a lot of the advertising about sports betting on NFL and this and that. How does it feel to have this kind of a part of daily life? I think on the one hand, it is very fun. On the other, I think, I have seen some ads that talk about creating a side hustle or passive income, whether it's from you guys or others. How does it feel to be a part of that reshaping of kind of how people interact with the financial markets?
The way I'll answer this question is I'll sort of go back to kind of the core of how, like kind of why we started the company. So I spent time in financial markets, like at Goldman and at Citadel. At Goldman, the thing that struck me is sort of the large institutions. I was there in 2016. There were two big events in 2016, Brexit, and then the US election, so the first Trump election. All the kind of big guys, what they were focused on is essentially, I want to get exposure to Brexit or hedge against it, and then I want to get exposure to Trump or hedge against that. And then we would create these financial bundles and all of that. And there were three issues. Like one, it was we gave them the wrong products. Like the traditional financial markets don't get you the exact sort of yes, no, is Trump going to win exposure that they were looking for. So one of the big things we sold is the S&P if they wanted to go long Trump. So people write about Trump, but then they lost money. So it's a horrible, The second thing is there wasn't an open, fair market for people to price this question. It was just like the bank deciding, and we would charge crazy fees. It was exorbitant. And the third that like irked me the most is like a lot of people have views on this. Like, and also a lot of people are impacted by Brexit. It's like this notion that like you are only impacted by Brexit if you're big enough to get a seat at the Goldman Sachs table. Like, was a bit weird to me. It was like kind of But this is where the idea was like, you have a financial market to price companies, commodities. Like, what if you built one to price like simple questions about the future? And if you did something like this, like the beauty of this is like areas of expertise, like everyone is an expert on something, like areas of knowledge and expertise and passion lie in a much broader set than just Wall Street. There's a lot more people out there, outside of Wall Street, that have views and have knowledge about politics, have knowledge about the economy. They read the news every day and they love it and they love interacting with the news. It could be the culture, it could be sports, it could be any of these sort of categories. But right now it's kind of this the set of instruments is very Wall Street specific. Like an average person is not going to look at an interest rate swap and be like, I'm going to participate in that. It's just, too complicated, very unrelatable. And I think the thing that's changed and that's great, I mean, there's, for example, like, there's this account on Twitter, it's like only grounded 10 or something like that. This person basically has made $70,000 trading on culture markets. So how successful movies are going to be, what Taylor Swift is going to release or not release. And they paid off their student loans with that. And it's just kind of like their favorite company, like they love the company so much because they're like, I have spent like hours and days and weeks and months learning about this. And up until now, it was kind of like, it was like a fun side thing. Now I can like actually exercise my skills and it could become a hobby and I could sort of try to make money off of it. And I see this very similar to kind of like Uber's value proposition with these types of marketplace, new category kind of creators. Like Uber was sort of like, you have a lot of free time. How about you ride a little bit and make some money? I think in our case, like you have a lot of knowledge, sometimes very niche, weird knowledge. So like maybe even your family doesn't even want to hear about it at Thanksgiving, but how about you kind of try to make some money off of that? And from the beginning, it's like, if you can build that financial market in a regulated, safe way, like where you put the right set of customer protection and you let people kind of openly and transparently trade against each other, that could be very interesting things because you can have this sort of like social crowdsourced, let's figure out the truth together. Let's figure out the price. The same way that markets figure out the price of.
When you talk about expert knowledge, I know there's this idea, from Warren Buffett and others that when it comes to the stock market, nobody knows anything, that isn't already priced in. Do you feel like that's different? Maybe could you call it like a long tail of topics, or is it you feel like that dynamic's different if you're making that proposition to people?
That's a great question. I actually think so. It's interesting. Like I think that because let's think about it in simple terms, right? Like if you go to stock market and try to buy an option on Tesla, like how could you know more than like the market makers, right? I mean, I actually worked at some of these. Like, how could you, right? Like, it's kind of rigged there. It's like there's asymmetric information. The large institutions, Wall Street has more information about where options and stocks are going to move than the average person. It's kind of a truth, right? And no matter what you do, you can do all the research in the world on the stock. You're not going to have the vast data sets and pools of data that like the big hedge funds have. So they will always have an advantage over you. And to me, it's that imbalance of advantage that make it sort of like, it's very hard to actually gain an edge if you put effort into the stock market. On Kalshi, it's different because like there's a team of traders, for example, on the weather that like scrape satellite data and they create correlation patterns and they have meteorologists in the team, etc. And they figure out like, all these sort of like sophisticated data science models to predict the weather next day. And they are making money of it. They're pretty successful. And the beauty of it is like, I don't think the hedge funds have any more information than they do, right? Like if
So
these
you
people
could
go
call
out,
that like creating the fundamentals, if you were, or like doing the work
Yes.
of understanding the fundamentals.
The fundamentals.
So that's
it's
where
like-
the truth side comes in.
I have studied Timothy Chalamet's eyes more than anyone, and therefore I know that he is SKD, right? That's like, that's what you're saying is like, there's people who
there a Kalshi
they
for that?
obsess about things. That's got to be a prediction market, right? Chalamet and SKD. Do you know about this?
I don't know about it. What is it?
There's like a rapper who is in disguise, and people think it might be Timothy Chalamet.
Oh, I don't know. That's interesting.
People like claim to know his eyes because, and say that it's him.
These markets reward people to go out and do research and then bring it into the open market, right? And over time we get holistically. So think about, for example, whether tariffs are net good or net bad for society, or whether there's going to be a recession this year or not, right? Like one way to do this is like you go and do this Bloomberg Economist survey and you ask a bunch of experts, hey, what do you think? And then they give an answer, and that's our forecast, right? That's historically been, this is what we believe to be true. But it doesn't work that well. If you compare that to the Kalshi economic forecast over the last few years, we have been much, much more accurate. It's just much better kind of gauge of what's going to happen. And the reason is because it's a very different mechanism, which is now I'm giving an incentive. I'm rewarding people to actually go out and do research and then come and trade on it, bring it to the market. And if you think of it, that incentive at scale, it's holistically making us smarter about, for example, the economy. It's making us smarter about COVID and whether it's going to come back. Like maybe this whole COVID episode of whether, hey, COVID is done, COVID is not done. If they were listening to the markets, we were saying Omicron is going to come back. There's an Omicron wave and it was going to come back because some traders were doing research and they spent a copious amount of times. They're not necessarily, by the way, like doctors or like people that you would imagine to be the COVID experts. They're people that maybe love the topics and spend so much time in quarantine reading about it. And then they brought that information to market, which is very useful. And if we had listened to the markets, maybe we would have kept the mask on for a little bit longer and we might have avoided the second wave.
Before we let you go, Tarek, you recently made a comment that went kind of viral. I think you got a lot of heat for it because people rightfully have concerns about the gamblification of society, where you said
Gamblification.
you were trademark. You said you want to financialize everything. What did you actually mean by that? Do you really mean that?
Why'd you scare my grandma with that comment?
Interesting. I think that, yeah, I saw that. I mean, it was taken out of context and people sort of like, took it in all sorts of directions. But really what it means is this notion of, if you believe that markets work, what they do is they discover prices. They're a very good mechanism for discovering fundamentals. I think, as you said it in a great way, fundamentals behind something. And then uncovering as much truth as possible behind that thing. And so what we're saying is like, sure, applying that to companies is very important. Applying that to commodities or currencies is very important. But what if we applied it to some of the most important pressing questions about our future, right? Like, could we apply it to a much broader set of things? And like, look, kind of from first principles, like we live in a world where the ratio of noise to signal has gone up a lot. Misinformation is everywhere. Polarization is kind of at an all-time high. People say different things about everything and you you don't know what to, like, you go to Twitter, if you go to my Twitter feed versus yours, we might see literally two entirely different versions of the word. To us, like, this is kind of a bit of an antidote. It's like, how about we apply some of the things that we discussed, like this mechanism for truth, this incentive to be truthful, to be unbiased, to be objective, to a lot of these questions, right? Is there going to be an earthquake in California? Where is hurricane going to hit in Florida? COVID, is going to be a recession? These questions that do actually impact people in their day-to-day, but today there's just like, it's like social media, where like the incentive is engagement, whereas prediction market, the incentive is truth. And so that's really what I meant by that. But I think that clip was taken out of context, out of a kind of a broader, broader explanation that I was giving.
Do you guys have a mission or vision or document for your own team to like steer people toward whatever type of truths you think are important? Or is it just kind of going to be driven by engagement, culture, excitement? Because I feel like that's potentially a pretty big question for you guys in what type of role you want to play in the world.
That's a great question. So yes, the answer is yes, definitely. And I think that the way that I sort of describe it is like, you have to have a balance. And, you know, there are certain things that, for example, may be more engaging but less useful from a truth-seeking perspective, but that help kind of like the things that are like less engaging but more truth-seeking from a kind of forecast perspective, right? So, and you have to balance out between those two. It's a bit like, and the example is like, you can look at a lot of marketplaces, right? Like, for example, maybe where Ubers are most needed are like in urban areas, but that's where it's harder to get riders, and they're less needed in like, by rural areas, but it's less needed in urban areas. But you still have to build a critical mass in urban area to get to the rural. And I think it's a little bit similar here. Like, you have to get enough of a critical mass in certain places to basically get, for example, personally, I'm always interested in the more longer term forecasts. The things that are sort of like, will AI overtake? Will we get another
Not
kind
when
of like,
the McRib is coming back this year?
What is McRib? Is it the burger?
Oh my God, Tarek.
Good for you. Good for you.
Good for you, man.
Well, who exactly is making these calls about what goes live on the site?
So a lot. I mean, and then the second point I was going to say. So a lot of it comes from our team. That like are figuring out what's trending on Twitter and like what's top of people's mind, like what's in the news. But the other thing, it's like, this is the other thing. Like, look, I believe in markets, right? Like, I'm a believer in markets, and like, it's like, look at what customers want and like what they're interested in, what they're asking about, and like have them suggest markets. The one caveat is like, that doesn't mean you just do anything. I mean, we're regulated. Everything goes through a regulated pipeline, and there's a number of things that we don't touch, like war, terrorism, assassination, violence, things that could create a bad incentive. We never touch those. One, because it would be illegal, and two, even if it wasn't, like, I think those would not necessarily, even though there could be interest from the forecast, like, for example, if you have a war market, I think it could create a perverse incentive. It could create a bad incentive, and we basically shy away and do not touch those. So I think you have to have a balance, and I think we've gotten fairly good at that balance.
All right, Tarek. Well, we'll let you go research the McRib and SKD, and yeah, we appreciate you being on the show.
Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate you having me.
Take care, man. Thanks to Tarek for coming on the show.
We're a new show, so please follow, like, subscribe everywhere you get podcasts. You can also find us in lovely high-definition video on Access Pod on YouTube.
If you like this episode, please leave a 5-star review or thumbs up and share it with a friend. It helps a lot.
You can find me at Hamburger on Twitter and at meaning.company.
You can find my newsletter at sources.news.
Access is part of the Vox Media Podcast Network, and the show is produced by Hooked Creators.
See you guys next time.
Au revoir.
Support for the show comes from Mercury. Growing as a business means being able to evolve and adapt with the changing times. So when it comes to finances, you need a partner who can adapt with you and let you do anything with your money. Banking, cards, spend management, invoicing, and more. With Mercury, you can do it all from one place, tailored to you and your business. It's banking at its most intuitive. Trust me, I use Mercury every day to run my business. Visit Mercury.com to join over 200,000 entrepreneurs who use Mercury. Mercury is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services provided through Choice Financial Group and Column N.A. members FDIC.